The text came at airport security. 5 words. I wasn't invited anymore. I stood there, holding my carry-on, the garment bag with Robert's mother's wedding veil folded carefully inside, and stared at my phone screen until the letters blurred. Behind me, someone cleared their throat impatiently. The security line shuffled forward. I didn't move. Ma'am? Ma'am, you need to keep moving. The TSA officer was young, kind eyes. I looked at him and wondered if he could see it on my face, the exact moment a mother becomes unnecessary. I stepped aside, found a bench near the windows where the planes sat fat and patient on the tarmac, their engines humming promises of destinations I was no longer going to. My phone felt heavy in my palm. I read the message again, then again, searching for something I'd missed, an autocorrect error, a follow-up text explaining this was a mistake, a cruel joke, something, anything other than what it was. Wedding is just her family. Sorry, should have said sooner. Have a good weekend. Her family. As if I weren't his. As if the 43 hours of labour that brought him into this world, the 2 jobs I worked when his father left, the college tuition I paid from my teacher's pension, as if none of that made me family. As if the last 8 months of planning, the dress I'd bought, the hotel I'd reserved in Portland, the early morning flight I'd arranged because I wanted to be there the night before, to help, to be useful, to be needed. As if I could simply be uninvited with 5 words and a careless sorry. The veil inside the garment bag seemed to pulse with its own life. White silk, Belgian lace, 73 years old. Robert's mother had worn it. I'd worn it. And now, what? Now it would go back in the closet with all the other things that outlived their purpose. I called him. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What would I say? Please explain why I'm not family. Please tell me what I did wrong. Please, please, please. God, how many times in the last 3 years had I said please to my own son? A plane lifted off, wheels tucking up into its belly like a child pulling in their knees. I watched it climb and disappear into the morning haze, and something in my chest tightened, then loosened, then tightened again. Not pain exactly, something else. Recognition, maybe, of a pattern I'd been too close to see. The folder was still in my suitcase, the one I kept meaning to throw away but never did. Bank statements, transfer receipts, the down payment for his condo, $32,000 from the sale of Robert's truck. The loan for the business degree he never finished, $18,000. The wedding photographer deposit, $2,500 just last month, because he'd asked and I'd said yes, of course yes, because that's what you do when your child needs help. Except it wasn't help, was it? It was expected, assumed. A function I performed like breathing. And now that the wedding was here, now that the checks had cleared and the help had been rendered, I was... What was the phrase he'd used last Christmas when I'd asked if I could bring my green bean casserole? Not necessary. The pattern stretched back years further. The summer he was 16 and wrecked my car. I'd paid the deductible, told insurance it was my fault so his rates wouldn't spike. The apartment deposits when he moved 5 times in 3 years, always someone else's drama, never his responsibility. The credit card I'd co-signed for emergencies that became his daily spending account. Robert used to warn me. "Helen," he'd say, that crease forming between his eyebrows, "you're teaching him that your money has no limits and your time has no value." I'd told him he was being harsh. That parents help their children. That's what love looked like. But Robert had been gone 6 years now, and my son's texts still came with $signs attached, more often than they came with questions about how I was doing. When had I last received a call that didn't need something? When had he last asked about my day, my book club, my garden, anything that was mine and not a problem he needed me to solve? I sat on that bench for 20 minutes, maybe 30. The morning light coming through the terminal windows had that thin, apologetic quality of early spring. Pale and unconvincing. People rushed past with their roller bags and their coffee cups, and their lives that apparently made sense, that followed logical patterns, where mothers who raised children alone and paid for weddings got to attend those weddings. My phone buzzed. I looked down, something stupid and hopeful rising in my throat. It was the hotel in Portland, confirming my reservation. "We look forward to welcoming you this evening, Ms. Winters." The laugh that came out of me didn't sound like my laugh. It sounded like something breaking. I opened my banking app, found the scheduled transfer for Monday, the final wedding payment, $5,000 for the reception venue. My fingers hovered over the cancel button. This was insane. This was vindictive. This was not something I did. I was the mother who understood, who gave second chances, who didn't make things difficult. I cancelled the transfer. The screen asked if I was sure. Yes, I was sure. Then I did something I'd never done before, something that felt both terrifying and obvious. I called my lawyer. Anne picked up on the 3rd ring. "Helen, is everything all right?" Funny how people could hear disaster in your voice before you said a word. "I need to make some changes," I said, "to my will. And some other things. Can I come in Monday morning?" A pause, the sound of papers rustling. "Of course. 9 o'clock? Helen has something. Monday's perfect." "Thank you, Anne." I hung up before she could ask what any reasonable person would ask, what happened. Because I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound petty, melodramatic, like an old woman whose feelings got hurt and now she was going to do something rash. Except it wasn't rash, it wasn't hurt feelings. It was something else entirely. Something that felt like waking up after a very long sleep and realizing you'd been dreaming someone else's version of your life. The taxi to the hotel cost $43. I sat in the back seat and watched Portland slide past, a city I'd never visited before this. A city I'd chosen because my son had chosen it, because his fiancée's family lived here, because I was supposed to be here celebrating. The streets were clean, trees everywhere, people walking dogs and pushing strollers and living their Saturday morning lives. I'd told myself I was being supportive, present, available. All those words that sounded like virtue, but felt increasingly like erasure. The hotel room was on the 4th floor, facing the parking lot. I'd booked it 3 months ago, 2 nights, king bed, late checkout on Sunday so I could attend the wedding brunch Stephanie's mother was hosting. I set the garment bag in the closet without unzipping it. The veil could stay hidden. It had practice. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the folder. It wasn't everything, just the last 3 years since Robert died. Before that, I'd helped less. Robert had insisted on boundaries, on letting Michael solve his own problems, learn from his own mistakes. But after the funeral, when Michael had called crying, saying he couldn't handle losing Dad and paying rent and keeping the business going, I'd stepped in. Of course I had. That's what you do when someone you love is drowning. Except Michael hadn't been drowning. He'd been treading water, waiting for rescue, and I'd swum out with a life raft he'd been counting on. The bank statements were meticulously organised. I'd kept them that way because some part of me had known, even then, even as I'd transferred the money and signed the cosigns and covered the overdrafts, that I'd need proof someday. Not for him, for myself. To remember why I'd done it, to justify it, to prove I'd been a good mother. $32,000 for the condo down payment. He'd promised to pay me back when the business took off. That was 18 months ago. $18,000 for the graduate program in business administration. He'd dropped out after 1 semester, said it wasn't the right fit, didn't mention the tuition was non-refundable. $7,000 in smaller transfers over 2 years. Car repairs, medical bills, insurance deductibles, each one urgent. Each one accompanied by gratitude that lasted exactly as long as it took him to need the next thing. And the wedding expenses. God, the wedding expenses. $2,500 for the photographer, $1,800 for the rehearsal dinner I'd offered to host, another $1,200 for the flowers when Stephanie's mother had gone over budget. I'd paid it all without question because he was my son, and this was his wedding, and I wanted him to have a beautiful day. I just thought I'd be there to see it. The room was very quiet. That particular silence of hotel rooms everywhere, the hum of air conditioning, the muffled sounds of other people's lives bleeding through walls. The sense of being nowhere and anywhere at once. I sat with the folder open in my lap and felt the weight of 3 years of saying yes pressing down on my shoulders like wet wool. My phone buzzed. Michael. Finally. I looked at the screen. Let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the nightstand and watched it vibrate itself into silence. The relief was immediate and nauseating, like stepping off a treadmill you didn't know you'd been running on until your legs stopped moving and you realized how exhausted you were, how long you'd been going, how far you'd traveled while staying in exactly the same place. He called again 10 minutes later. I didn't answer. He sent a text. "Mom, can we talk?" I could imagine the conversation. He'd be sorry I was upset. He'd explain that Stephanie's family was traditional, that they had a specific vision for the wedding, that it wasn't personal, that I needed to understand, that maybe I was being a little sensitive, that he'd make it up to me, that we could do something together later, just the two of us, when things calmed down. And I'd listen, and I'd agree, and I'd say it was fine, and I'd delete the photo I'd already edited of Robert's mother's veil, so I could post it on Facebook with some caption about legacy and love, and I'd go back home and wait for the next time he needed money or a favor or someone to perform the function of a mother without requiring anything that looked like respect. Or I could do something different. I opened my laptop, logged into the bank. The $5,000 transfer for Monday was already cancelled. I stared at it for a long time, that one small act of refusal. Then I clicked through to my savings account, found the automatic transfer I'd set up years ago, the one that sent $300 every month to Michael's checking account. "Just while you get established," I'd said. That had been 41 months ago. I cancelled that too. Then I looked at the credit card, the one with his name on it linked to my account, because he'd needed it for business expenses and his credit wasn't good enough for his own. The balance was $4,200. I'd been paying it off slowly, assuming he'd eventually take over. I called the credit card company, removed him as an authorized user. The representative asked if I was sure there was a balance. Did I understand I was now solely responsible for it? Yes, I understood. Yes, I was sure. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, from something that felt dangerously close to power. That night, I ordered room service. Not because I was hungry, I wasn't, but because I could. Grilled salmon with asparagus and a glass of white wine I didn't need permission to have. The waiter who brought it was maybe 25. He smiled and said, "Enjoy your evening, ma'am," and I wondered if he could tell I was supposed to be somewhere else. If loneliness had a smell, I ate slowly, took my time, let the silence settle around me like snow. This was the price, I thought, this hollow feeling, this sense of being untethered. I'd spent 3 years orbiting my son's needs, and now that I'd stopped, I had no idea which direction to go, no momentum. No purpose, just stillness and hotel furniture and the low hum of the air conditioning cycling on and off. But there was also something else. Relief. Small and uncomfortable, like a pebble in your shoe you only notice after you take the shoe off. I'd been carrying weight I hadn't named, and now it was on the floor beside the bed where I'd dropped it. The folder, the phone, the constant vigilance of waiting for the next request. All of it, temporarily, someone else's problem, or no one's. I finished the wine, opened the novel I'd brought, the one I'd been reading for 3 months, in stolen minutes between phone calls and email transfers and running interference for problems that weren't mine to solve. Read 2 chapters without interruption. Went to sleep at 9:30 because no one needed me to be awake. Sunday morning. The wedding was at 3. I knew this because I'd known it for 8 months. I'd helped choose the venue. I'd been copied on the planning emails. I'd been invited, past tense. I got dressed anyway, not the mother of the groom dress I'd brought, that could stay in the suitcase. Instead, the comfortable pants and sweater I'd packed for travelling, walking shoes, my good coat. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw a 74-year-old woman who'd survived 2 hours of labour, 23 years of single motherhood, cancer, widowhood, and now this, being dismissed with 5 words by the person she'd sacrificed the most for. I looked okay, considering, maybe even good. I took a taxi to the park near the venue, a place called Pittock Mansion. Historic, expensive, with views of the city and mountains that cost extra. The park itself was public, free. I found a bench about 200 yards from the main entrance, where I could see the driveway, the arriving cars, the people in their wedding clothes climbing the steps. This was insane. I knew that. This was the behaviour of someone who couldn't let go, who was punishing herself, who needed to see what she was missing in order to feel justified in her anger. Except I didn't feel angry. I felt curious. Who was he when I wasn't there to witness it? What did his happiness look like when it didn't need my validation or my checkbook? Did he even notice I wasn't there? Or had I been so thoroughly optional that my absence was just nothing, a non-event, a minor adjustment to the seating chart? The guests started arriving at 2:30. I recognised some of them from photos Michael had posted on Facebook. Stephanie's family, loud, cheerful, well-dressed. Michael's college friends, his business partner. Everyone looked appropriate. No one looked confused. No one seemed to be asking, "Where's Michael's mother?" At 2:50, Michael arrived. He looked nervous, happy, kept running his hand through his hair the way he'd done since he was 7 years old. A tell that meant he was excited or worried or both. His suit fit well, probably custom. I wondered if I'd paid for that too, somewhere in the blur of transfers and emergencies, and just this once, Mum, I promise. He was laughing at something Stephanie's brother said. He didn't look like someone who'd just disinvited his mother from his wedding. He looked like a groom, nothing more, nothing less. A man starting a new chapter, unburdened by the old one. The ache in my chest wasn't what I expected. It wasn't sharp or breaking. It was dull, ancient, the kind of pain that's been there so long you mistake it for your normal heartbeat. I stayed until 3:15. Watched them all go inside. The doors closed. The driveway emptied. Somewhere in that building, my son was getting married, and I was sitting on a park bench feeding squirrels pretzel pieces from the snack bag I'd bought at the hotel vending machine. I could have crashed it, could have walked in and forced him to acknowledge me, to explain, to choose between his new family and the woman who'd raised him alone. I could have made a scene, made him uncomfortable, made sure everyone knew what he'd done. Instead, I stood up, brushed the crumbs off my coat, walked back to the taxi stand, because the thing about dignity is this: you can't demand it from someone else. You can only choose whether to keep giving it away to people who've shown you they don't value it. And I was done giving. Lily texted me Sunday evening, "Grandma, are you still in Portland? Can we meet for breakfast tomorrow?" My granddaughter, 22 years old, smart in ways that had nothing to do with the business degree Michael had dropped out of. She was finishing her master's in environmental science, on scholarship, on her own, with a determination that reminded me of myself at that age, before I'd learned to shrink my dreams to fit other people's comfort. I hadn't told her about the text, about being uninvited. I'd planned to make an excuse, to lie and say I'd had to fly home early, to protect Michael from looking like the kind of son who disinvites his mother 5 hours before boarding a plane. But looking at her text, something in me shifted. Yes, I'd love to. 9 a.m? I know a place near campus. Perfect. Can't wait to see you. Can't wait. When had Michael last said those words to me? We met at a cafe with windows facing the street and plants hanging from exposed brick walls, the kind of place where everyone had laptops and everyone looked purposeful. Lily arrived 10 minutes late, flushed, apologizing about traffic, and when she hugged me, I felt something crack in my chest that I'd been keeping carefully sealed since Friday. "You okay, Grandma?" "Fine. Just tired from travelling." She studied my face with the same expression Robert used to give me when he knew I was lying, but was deciding whether to push. Then she ordered us both coffee and a pastry basket and settled into her chair with the easy confidence of someone who took up space without apologizing for it. "So," she said, "the wedding." I added cream to my coffee, watched it swirl. I didn't go. Her eyebrows rose. "You... what?" "I wasn't invited." Well, I was, and then I wasn't. I pulled out my phone, showed her the text, watched her face change as she read it. "Jesus Christ." She looked up. "Grandma, I'm so..." "Don't." I covered her hand with mine. Don't apologize for him. That's been my job for too long. You flew all the way here. I did, with the veil. The one from, yes. Lily sat back. Her face had gone carefully blank, the way it did when she was angry and trying not to show it. She looked like me in that moment. Same jaw, same refusal to perform emotions she didn't feel. "What did you do?" she asked. I told her. All of it. The cancelled transfer, the lawyer appointment tomorrow morning, the credit card, the automatic payments I'd stopped, the hours I'd spent in my hotel room Saturday night going through my banking history and realizing I'd given him nearly $78,000 over 3 years, and he'd thanked me by removing me from the most important day of his life because I wasn't convenient. I said it all without crying, without apologizing, without softening it to make it sound less damning. And Lily listened without interrupting, her coffee going cold between her hands, her expression shifting from shock to something that looked like recognition. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then, "Good, good, good. You should have done it years ago." She leaned forward. "Grandma, he's been using you. You know that, right? The whole family knows it. Aunt Sarah used to complain about it every Thanksgiving. Michael calls Mom for money and she just gives it to him. No questions, no boundaries, nothing. We all saw it. I was trying to help him." "You were enabling him. There's a difference." She said it gently, but it still landed like a slap. "You taught him that your value was in your wallet. And now he's learned that lesson so well, he doesn't need you for anything else." The truth of it sat between us like a third person at the table. "I wanted to give you something," I said, changing the subject because I couldn't look at that truth any longer. I pulled the small box from my purse. The locket I'd brought, the one that had belonged to Robert's grandmother, gold, delicate, with a small diamond in the centre. I'd planned to give it to Stephanie. For the wedding I'd tell them. Another offering, another purchase of relevance. I handed it to Lily instead. She opened it slowly, carefully, and when she saw what was inside, her eyes filled. "Grandma." "It was meant for family," I said. "You're my family. The one who shows up. The one who asks how I am and actually wants to know the answer. So it should be yours." She closed her hand around it. Then she got up, came around the table, and wrapped her arms around me hard enough that I couldn't breathe for a moment. When she pulled back, she was crying. "I love you," she said, "and I'm so sorry he did this to you." "I'm not." The words surprised me even as I said them. Not anymore. It showed me something I needed to see. We stayed for 2 more hours. Talked about her research, her thesis, a boy she was dating who restored old motorcycles and wrote poetry. She made me laugh, made me feel like a person with a future instead of a function that had outlived its usefulness. When we finally left, she hugged me again at the door. "Monday, right, the lawyer?" 9 a.m. You'll tell me how it goes? I will. And Grandma? She squeezed my hand. When you get home, throw away that folder. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Anne's office was in a converted Victorian on Burnside, the kind of place where the floors creaked and the light through the windows made everything look softer than it was. She'd been my lawyer for 12 years, since Robert's estate, since the house refinancing, since the living will I'd updated after my cancer diagnosis. She knew my business. She also knew my son. Coffee? She offered, gesturing to the pot on the credenza. No, thank you. Let's just start. She settled behind her desk, hands folded, and waited. I want to change my will, I said. Remove Michael as beneficiary. Everything goes to Lily instead. And I want to establish a trust for her education, her future, something he can't access, can't contest, can't touch. Anne's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. May I ask what prompted this? I could have told her the whole story, the text, the wedding, the 3 years of transfers and cosigns and enabling, but it would have sounded petty, like an overreaction to a single slight. So I just said, he's shown me who he is. I'm choosing to believe him. She nodded slowly, pulled out her legal pad. This is a significant change, Helen. I want to make sure you've thought it through. Once we file this, once the trust is established, it's difficult to reverse. Not impossible, but difficult. I've thought it through. And you're certain? No possibility of reconciliation, or I'm certain. She studied me for another moment, then started writing. We spent 90 minutes going through the details. The house, the savings, the investment accounts Robert had left me, the life insurance policy, the small pension from my teaching years, all of it. Everything I'd spent 40 years accumulating, everything Robert and I had built together, would go to Lily, to someone who'd earned it by showing up, by caring, by treating me like a person instead of a resource. There's one more thing, I said as Anne printed out the documents. I have him listed as my emergency contact, my healthcare proxy. I want that changed too. To Lily, to Lily. Anne made the notation, printed an additional form. I signed everything with careful strokes, my hand steadier than I'd expected. Each signature felt like closing a door, not slamming it. That would have given him too much importance. Just closing it quietly, firmly, the way you close the door on a room you're done using. When it was finished, Anne walked me to the door. You're doing the right thing, she said. For what it's worth, boundaries are healthy. Even with family, especially with family, I know. And Helen, she touched my arm. I'm sorry. About the wedding, that must have hurt. It did, I said, but I'm okay now. And the strange thing was, I meant it. Tuesday morning, I walked into my bank in Seattle, the same branch where I'd opened my first account 47 years ago, where the manager still remembered Robert, where I'd co-signed Michael's first credit card application when he was 19 and needed to build credit. The manager's name was David. He greeted me with the comfortable familiarity of someone who'd processed my mortgage, my retirement rollover, my husband's death benefits. "Mrs. Winters, good to see you. What can I help you with today?" "I need to remove my son from all accounts where he has access or authorization." His smile dimmed slightly. "I see. May I ask?" "It's time," I said, simply, without elaboration. He led me to his office, pulled up my accounts on his computer. There were 4 places where Michael's name appeared. Joint checking account opened 6 years ago for emergencies, savings account where he had transfer authorization, access to my credit line, and listed as account beneficiary alongside Lily on my primary checking. "Let's start with the joint account," David said. "I'll need to close it." "Close it? Mrs. Winters, if there's a balance, we'd need your son's signature to..." "There's $63 in that account. You can transfer it to his personal checking. I want the account closed today," David typed, frowned at his screen. "It looks like there were several overdrafts this year that you covered from your primary account. The automatic overdraft protection is linked..." "Remove the link. Let the account close." He made a note. We moved through the rest systematically, removing Michael's transfer authorization. He'd used it twice in the last month, I saw, $400 and $200, both labelled business expenses, removing him from the credit line current balance. $7,000, all charges his. Changing the beneficiary designation so Lily was sole inheritor. Each deletion felt surgical, clean, necessary. "Mrs. Winters," David said carefully after we'd gone through everything, "I have to ask, is everything all right between you and your son?" "Everything's fine," I said. "I'm just setting appropriate boundaries, because if there's elder abuse or financial coercion, we have protocols." "There's no abuse. There's just a mother who's tired of being an ATM." I said it lightly, but David's expression suggested he understood exactly what I meant. "I'll process all of this today," he said. "Is there anything else?" I hesitated. Then, "One more thing. I want alerts set up. Any attempt to add himself back to these accounts, any attempt to access them, any contact with the bank using my information, I want to be notified immediately. I can do that." "And David?" I met his eyes. "If my son comes in here or calls and tries to reverse any of this, or says I'm confused, or suggests I'm not of sound mind, you know me, you've known me for nearly 20 years. I'm making these decisions clearly, calmly, and for my own protection. Do you understand?" Something in his face softened. "I understand, Mrs. Winters, and for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing." How many people would tell me that before I stopped needing to hear it? I walked out of the bank into spring sunshine and realized my shoulders didn't hurt. That constant tension I'd been carrying, the one that lived between my shoulder blades and radiated up my neck whenever my phone rang, had loosened. Not gone, but lighter. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the art supply store, bought watercolor paper, new brushes, a set of paints in colors that made me feel something I couldn't name. Robert and I used to paint together on weekends. Nothing serious, just the pleasure of making something without purpose or profit. After he died, I'd packed it all away. Then Michael's needs had filled the space where hobbies used to live. And I'd forgotten I was someone who created things just for the joy of it. At home, I set up in the dining room, the one with good light, the one Michael used to drop his laptop and papers on when he visited because he knew I wouldn't complain. I spread the paper out, mixed colours, and for 3 hours didn't think about wills or banks or weddings or sons who sent 5-word texts that redefined your worth. I painted trees, abstract ones, nothing realistic, just shapes and colours and the feeling of growth. My phone rang around 6. Michael. I looked at the screen, let it ring, turned back to my painting. He called again 10 minutes later, then texted, "Mum, I know you're upset. Can we please talk?" I set the phone face down and painted until the light faded and I couldn't see the colours anymore. Only then did I read his message again. "I know you're upset. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I made a mistake. Not, I should have handled that differently. Just an acknowledgement of my feelings, framed as if they were the problem. As if I were being irrational, difficult, too sensitive." I deleted the text without responding. Then I cleaned my brushes, made myself tea, and sat by the window watching the neighbourhood settle into evening. Somewhere in Portland, Michael and Stephanie were back from their honeymoon by now, posting photos, starting their married life. Somewhere in that life, there was an absence where I used to be. A mother-shaped hole they'd decided they didn't need to fill. And I found I could live with that. More than that, I found I could live. I shredded the folder on Thursday morning, not in a fury, not crying, just methodically, 1 page at a time, feeding the 37 pages of bank statements and transfer receipts and proof of my own enabling into the shredder I kept in the home office. The machine made its steady mechanical sound, a grinding, consuming sound, and I watched 3 years of financial history turn into confetti. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to Michael, not to myself, not to anyone who might someday ask why I'd drawn this line, why I'd chosen dignity over reconciliation, why I'd walked away from my only child rather than continue accepting the crumbs he offered while he ate the meal I'd paid for. The evidence didn't matter. The betrayal was already written in places that couldn't be shredded in my memory, in my body, in the permanent rewiring of my understanding of who my son was versus who I'd needed him to be. When the last page disappeared into the machine, I emptied the bin into a garbage bag, carried it to the outside can, let it go. Then I went to the closet. The veil was still in its garment bag, untouched since Friday at the airport. I unzipped it slowly. The silk caught the afternoon light coming through the bedroom window, that particular luminosity of old fabric, the kind that holds decades of hope in its threads. 3 generations of women had worn this veil. 3 generations of promises made, vows taken, lives joined. I'd thought Michael's wedding would be the 4th. I'd thought legacy meant passing things forward, always forward, in an unbroken line from mother to son to grandchildren, on and on until everyone who remembered the original wearer was gone and the veil was just a beautiful antique with no story attached. But legacy doesn't work that way. Legacy is something you give to people who value what it represents. And Michael had shown me, clearly and without malice, that he didn't value what I represented. Not the sacrifices, not the love, not the 43 hours of labour, or the 23 years of single motherhood, or the $78,000 in transfers. None of it had made me essential to him. It had made me useful. And when the usefulness ended, so did my welcome. I folded the veil back into its tissue paper, zipped the bag, put it on the top shelf of the closet behind the winter coats, where it would wait. Maybe Lily would want it someday, maybe she wouldn't. Either way, it would wait for someone who understood that heirlooms weren't transactions, they were trust made tangible. My phone rang while I was standing there. Michael again. I answered this time. "Mum, I'm here." A pause, relief in his voice. "I've been trying to reach you all week. Why haven't you been answering?"
"I've been busy."
"Look, I know you're upset about the wedding and I'm sorry you feel that way, but Stephanie's mum was really specific about the guest list and it was already so over budget. And we thought you'd understand, that it wasn't personal, it was just, what? Stop explaining. I understand perfectly. You made your choice and now I'm making mine." Another pause, longer. "What does that mean?" "It means the automatic transfers have stopped. The credit card access is gone. You're not on my accounts anymore, not on my will, not on my emergency contacts. It means I'm done being your backup plan." Jesus, Mom, You're being ridiculous. Over one wedding invitation? No, over 3 years of being treated like an ATM. Over learning that my value to you begins and ends with my checking account. Over being disinvited from your wedding with 5 words and an apology that wasn't actually an apology. So what, you're cutting me off? Punishing me because I hurt your feelings? The word feelings hung there between us, like something fragile he was trying to minimize, make small, make dismissible. I'm not punishing you, Michael, I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. This is insane. You can't just, I can, I have, and I'm at peace with it. Stephanie's pregnant. The words landed like stones, calculated, weaponized. I'm giving you a grandchild, so you'll have to forgive me. You'll have to come back. You'll have to resume your function because now there's a new generation that will need you. Something in me went very still. Congratulations, I said. Meant it. I hope you're both very happy. So, you're not going to... you'll want to be involved, right? When the baby comes? That depends. On what? On whether you want me there, Michael. Not my money, Not my usefulness, me, the person, your mother. Do you want me in your child's life because you value me, or because you think I'll babysit for free and pay for things you can't afford? Silence. Long silence. I have to go, he said finally. Okay, maybe we can talk about this later, when you're less emotional. I'm not emotional. I've never been clearer. Right. Okay, I'll call you later if you want. He hung up. I stood in my bedroom holding the phone and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not the sharp thrill of revenge, just a profound, bone-deep calm. The kind of calm that comes when you stop fighting the truth and let it rearrange you into someone new. I'd raised my son, loved him, given him every advantage I could afford and some I couldn't, and he'd grown into a man who saw me as a means to an end. That was the truth, not a truth I'd chosen, not one I'd wanted, but truth nonetheless, and I could spend the rest of my life fighting it, trying to prove my worth, trying to earn his respect, trying to make him see me, or I could accept it and build something else. Something smaller maybe, but mine. I chose mine. That night I slept better than I had in 3 years. 6 months later I was painting in my dining room when Lily let herself in with the spare key I'd given her. She'd started coming by on Sundays, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with her laptop and schoolwork, sometimes with nothing but herself and an easy comfort I'd forgotten could exist between family members. "Grandma, you have to see this," she said, pulling out her phone. Photos from her thesis fieldwork, soil samples, water quality tests. Her face bright with the particular joy of someone who'd found their purpose and was pursuing it without apology. We made lunch together, talked about her research, her boyfriend who wrote poetry and restored motorcycles, her plans after graduation. She asked about my week, about the book club I'd joined, about the watercolour class I was taking at the community centre on Tuesdays. Asked because she cared about the answer, not because she was looking for an opening to ask for something. This was family, I'd learned, not obligation or transaction, just presence, just showing up because the person mattered, not because they were useful. She left around 3, hugging me at the door the way Robert used to, firm and long and meaning it. After she left, I cleaned up the lunch dishes and found myself thinking about Michael, not with anger, not even with sadness anymore, just with a distant sort of acknowledgement, the way you might think about a house you used to live in and no longer recognize as yours. He'd tried at first to find his way back in, texts that started apologetic and ended accusatory. A voicemail 2 months in saying I was being cruel, that Stephanie was having a difficult pregnancy and could really use my support, that I was going to regret this when the baby came. A birthday card in August with a check for $50 and a note that said, "No hard feelings, right?" I'd deposited the check, sent back a polite thank you. Nothing more. Because forgiveness, I'd learned, didn't mean going back. It meant letting go of the expectation that things would ever be different. It meant accepting that some people will only ever see you as what you can do for them, and choosing not to waste energy trying to prove your humanity to someone who's decided you don't have any. I'd lost my son. That was the truth, the price, the weight I carried into this new version of my life. But I'd lost him years before the wedding. I'd just finally stopped pretending otherwise, and what I'd found, what I'd gained in the space where that relationship used to demand so much of me was bigger than I'd expected. Room for hobbies, room for friendships that didn't revolve around crisis management, room for mornings where my first thought wasn't what does he need, room for myself. I thought about the women who'd worn the veil before me, Robert's mother, who'd raised 6 children through the Depression and never complained, my own mother, who'd worked 2 jobs and still showed up to every school play. Women who'd given everything, who'd sacrificed everything, who'd believed that's what love looked like. And maybe it did for them in their time. But I'd learned something different, that giving everything leaves you with nothing, that love without boundaries becomes servitude, that mother is an identity, not a job description, and the moment you let it become only a function, you disappear. So this is what I'd tell you. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself, the one who always says yes, who always shows up, who always pays, who measures your worth by how much you can give until there's nothing left. Your silence isn't kindness. It's abandoning yourself. Your no isn't cruelty. It's remembering you're a person, not a function. And the people who love you will understand that. The ones who don't, the ones who need you diminished to feel secure, were never loving you anyway. They were loving what you could do for them. And you deserve more than that. You always have. That evening, I sat by the window with my tea, the good cup, the one I usually saved for guests, and watched the light fade over my garden. The roses Robert planted were blooming again, red ones, his favourite. I'd almost let them die the first year after he was gone, too overwhelmed to tend them. But they'd come back, stubborn, insistent, beautiful, like me.